Today we're talking about Bobcat throttle linkage. I recreated the original setup on a Bobcat 520 with a Kohler K532 engine. It's an opposed cylinder engine, and ask from Kyle to go through how the throttle linkage is set up because it's very common for it not to be correct. I'm going to show you how it works, and then I'm going to point out why it failed and why somebody changed it to something else, because I think it's really important to cover this is how it's supposed to be and then show you the good chances of why it's not like that, because the failure points and the associated problems with that, and just how confusing it is in the first place. It took me hours of looking at this, and just by a stroke of luck, twisting the throttle linkage in my fingers, I went, wait a second, and I realized all the marks in the rod from 50 years. First, let's start here. This is our governor. This is an external governor, controls our ignition. This is our speed control bracket. This is our governor spring. This is our governor arm. Now, we have a carburetor. We have our choke. We have our butterfly that controls the carburetor. And we have our idle adjustment screw. And then, of course, we have our throttle linkage. This piece here runs from the governor arm to the butterfly. And then we have another piece of linkage. And it looks really weird because it's like, how's that on there? Well, it's tension. It's held on by tension. Wraps around here, runs down underneath the intake. Throttle runs back to this rod here. The rod connects with a cross member. The cross member is held in place by rubber bushings, as you can see. Now, mine were all wore out. I've replaced these. They look dirty now, but those are brand new. Above it is the choke linkage. Interestingly enough, when we get down to the end of this, you'll see a fix that I had to make. That repair sleeve, the coupler, is a fix I had to make. Okay, so our throttle connects to this. Now, in order to keep tension on everything, on the choke and on the throttle linkage actually sits down in a groove on the choke linkage, and all of it works together to keep everything in place. Now, as years have gone by, things have gotten rusty, and like the choke, you can see, is not only missing its bushing, but it's been missing the bushing so long and out of place for so long that it actually kind of wore some of the bracket out. If you don't have this all hooked up and in working perfect order, at any point this is going to come apart. And I think that's what happened here. I think at some point this maybe got disassembled for a carburetor repair or something, and somebody didn't know how to put something back together correctly. This rod, you would think, you're like, wow, that's really tight, that shouldn't go there. And logic would say, yeah, that's going to bind up, that's not good, but that's actually how it stays together. This has no fastener on the end. Here, I'll put it in the carrier. I'm just going to run the throttle back and forwards. Right now, the throttle should be off. And again, as we go forward, move the throttle head, it's actually pushing the rod backwards and just allowing the governor spring to do its job. It's not actually controlling the motion of the throttle. It's not actually saying, hey, give it more gas. It's the ignition timing, the governor, all of that works to do that. So you cannot have this throttle linkage running into the governor arm. And the reason why is because if you disrupt that connection. If you hook the rod through the governor or something like that, you are basically saying, I'm controlling the speed of this engine, not the governor rod. Well, that works until you run it too high of RPM and blow the engine up. So that's why this rod here cannot actually connect to any of this stuff, because it has to operate autonomously from this spring and this here. So we're taking pressure off right here like this. Let's see, we're gonna go full throttle. Now we're open all the way. All right. Okay, there's no tension here on this. So if this thing starts going too fast and getting out of control, the governor will actually spin with this centrifugal force and get ahead and slow itself back down to where it's not supposed to be. So that's why this rod cannot be connected, physically attached to any of these things, because then it is limited by wherever the rod's placed and not what the governor says it should be doing. Hope that makes sense. I think the use of the rubber bushings, both here in the throttle linkage and on the choke, it was good at first, and you know, probably worked for a lot of years, but as they wore out and as other people got in here and did things, it just stopped working correctly. Even this, I should really take this rod out and polish it up a little bit and clean some of the crud off of it, and clean especially that area, because that's where the two meet. It's pretty grimy there and pretty rough. And even the choke, you know, the choke doesn't work the best. It works better than it ever has now that I have everything hooked up correctly, but it's not perfect. I assume that when these pieces wear out and the linkage gets loose, stuff starts falling and it stops working. So I would imagine that that's probably what happened here. Follow-up video, I'll show you how you set the RPM with the Kohler manual, but that'll give you the general idea of how the linkage all works. That's a good place to start. And then you got to time it and set the RPMs correctly with this bracket and the position of this spring.